The third and final gathering of former Ohev members occurred on May 28, 2023, at the home of Bev and Joel Levine. This group shared memories of growing up at Ohev, raising their children there, continuing the friendships that brought them into the congregation initially, and making new friends too, all which continued to be some of the most important relationships in their lives. They described the atmosphere at Ohev as not just one of warmth and friendliness, but also an atmosphere that conveyed the feeling that members were valued and that all the volunteer work performed was important and needed. They too talked about the rabbis, their wives who added much, and the wonderful programs that Ohev provided. These participants were Mary Birnbaum, Phil Braverman, David Friedman, Elaine Friedman, Sally Gordon, Larry Gordon, Randy Katcher, Bev Levine, Joel Levine, Mark Lichman, Carol Peltzy, Barb Strauss, Steve Strauss, Alan Wasserman, and Janice Wasserman.
I used to belong to KI when I first came to Kansas City many years ago. And after about 4 years at KI, we decided it was time for a change, so we joined Ohev, along with a lot of people that joined that time, because Marvin Dent was the membership VP. And so in 1976 is when we joined, along with, as I say, a host of other people that year.
And following that, Marvin Denton also brought my family in. I had small children, and he is actually a relative through marriage and one of the nicest people I ever knew. And he brought us into the Ohev family, and it was just a pleasure to do that.
Well, the people here, David and I probably are the newest, we're the newest members of Ohev. I was looking for a rabbi to help me to convert, and we went to a Friday night service in, oh gosh, May of 2003. Or it could have been earlier than that.
It might have been 2002.
It might have been 2002. Yeah. Anyway, we went to a Friday night service, and Warren Siegel and Louise Siegel were there. Louise was Sisterhood president at the time. And they welcomed us out in, because it was in the chapel. And so they helped us find which books, and we sat down and went to the service. And after the service, Rabbi Danny, you know, was just like shooting right over to us to greet us and say how nice it is to see you. But really, we need to come on Saturday morning, because that's really when most people come. And the friendliness of Warren and Louise was just amazing. And eventually I talked to Rabbi Danny about sponsoring me, and he was my sponsoring rabbi. So.
He married us too.
Yeah. When did you? David joined before I did.
Well, you couldn't join till your conversion was complete yet.
Right.
But,
and we were married there in 2004. We were the last people that Danny married, because he left for Houston in July of 2000. Well, no, August 1st, 2004.
I remember we moved up here in 1981, and we moved up here from Mississippi, y'all.
The Gulf Coast.
And most of the places that we've lived in between where we were from, New York and here, the city or the area, there was one or two shuls, either for the city or the area. And we come up here and look around and wow, there are 10 shuls, we can go shul shopping. That was a big excitement. And so we did go to a lot of shuls. And the thing for both of us was the people at Ohev were just so open, welcoming. It was just so different than every other shul that we went to. So it was like we found our home.
Our situation is different. I was raised and very, very active at KI. And then I found him and married him, and he goes, we're going to my synagogue. And his synagogue happened to be Ohev. And I really never looked back. It was a very open, welcoming group of people. And
and I was kind of born into Ohev because my parents, when they came over from Europe, they got together with my aunt, Millie Kritzler, who was a longtime member also. And so I've been a member since it was over at Sandusky, and I got bar mitzvah before the sanctuary in the new place, or now the old place, was even built.
Speaking of Sandusky, working up in Wyandotte County, I taught in many schools up there. And I would pass by 7th and Sandusky and think that's what Ohev used to be, because that's what I was told. And now it's Go Chicken Go.
It's kosher chicken.
Right.
We have a different approach, even though what is said here we're very familiar with, joining Ohev for the same reasons. So Sally said this morning, why don't we make it in the form of a poem? Well, up to the challenge, it took me, all of 5 minutes, but this is our approach, how we joined Ohev. Newbies out of college in 1972, getting close to high holidays, we were looking for a shul. We found our home at Ohev, the members were so nice. We joined in just a moment, we did not think it twice. But the real reason we joined up, Marvin Denton's pull was strong. It's here you have your Jewish home, it's here that you belong. Day and night he made his pitch, his recruiting pitch had no lack. We joined the team at Ohev just to get Marvin off our back. And everybody can relate to that, and that is to honor Marvin Denton, Mr. Ohev, our honorary president for life. And
We should get a copy of that to him.
Oh, yeah.
I have it on my computer, yes. But Marvin was, and still is, very strong in that regard, and we joined up and have been members over 50 years.
I was born into it like a couple others here. So my grandparents were very active. My grandfather was a past president of Ohev back in the 1930s. And then, of course, my parents, even though my father was from New York, my mother was born into it. And then here we are. So literally born into Ohev as a third generation.
My parents were from KI like Barb's, and Joel said we're going to join Ohev.
Like Barb's.
I was born in Ohev as well. I think my mother was born into Ohev as well. My grandparents belonged to Ohev. At Sandusky, I'm pretty sure as well. I think I remember them just barely. And when we moved out to 75th, I know I had my bar mitzvah there. I've come, I've gone, I've come back, and I'm thrilled to be a continuing member now.
I have, I was neighbors with Barbara Goldansky, and she invited me to her daughter Sherry's bat mitzvah, and in those days girls were bat mitzvah on Friday evening. And I went, and it was up in Waldman Hall. Everybody was so friendly, and I knew a lot of the names because I grew up in Kansas City, Kansas, but did not belong to Ohev Sholom. So when Arnold and I first got married, we joined a Reformed temple where I had to introduce myself every time I went to anything. And so I felt very much at home that Friday night at Ohev Sholom. And then my sister-in-law belonged there, and so a few months later, she invited me to the Talmud Torah luncheon. And guess what? Everybody remembered me, remembered my name, and it was fabulous. So I've been there ever since for the same reasons.
I joined in 2005. I joined because Scott became rabbi, and at KU, Scott and I were roommates.
I didn't know.
At the time, Scott was finishing up his journalism degree. And this is before he worked for the Chronicle, before he went to rabbinical school. So I was kind of surprised years later, I didn't keep in touch with him, that he'd become a rabbi.
I know that.
And I just assumed he became a Reform rabbi, just from knowing him at KU. But he had a very strong Jewish identity, loved Israel. And our connection was that we had both just gotten back from Israel independently at KU, and we had that connection. And but when I heard that he was interviewing for Ohev, I was there that weekend. And I can't remember, I was either there on a Friday night or a Saturday morning. And for me, it was just a done deal. I was going to join because of him. And he took me under his wing and made me feel very comfortable. And I was comfortable at Ohev from the beginning. Not just from him, but from everybody else.
So now we're at Ohev. Why did you stay at Ohev? So you got pulled in, whether it was from Marvin or somebody else, but what made you want to remain there? What made it your congregational family?
For all the same reasons. It was family.
It's like the TV show Cheers, when you walk in and everybody knows your name.
Yeah.
And you just, there's a comfort level there that it was a very welcoming place. It wasn't so big that you were just one of the other people. And that, makes it very special to be recognized and to be acknowledged. And that's an important thing. When you move here from somewhere where you have no family here and no history here, you need, the community helps, and Ohev was our family and our community, and also, like Barb said, comfortable. We raised both our kids here on all those milestones. As soon as I moved here, a few months later, my mother died, so Rabbi Fitzgerman got me through that. A little bit later, we had our first child. Fitzgerman got us through that, and then the bar bat mitzvahs, and just all those life milestones. It was so nice to have that wonderful place to celebrate.
One of the things that was, I think, unique at Ohev, you could be as involved as you want, as little as you want, or as much as you want. Very often I've had conversations with my mother, and I talked to her about, oh, this is what's going on, this is what the shul's doing, and she would always say, for a shul your size, I can't believe how active it is, how involved it is in so many different things. And she was up here for one of the first kosher fests. She was up here for the Siyum HaTorah. She saw how involved everybody was. And she was just amazed. And that's true. You look at the people here, and everybody here was involved in so many different aspects of Ohev. And that's what makes Ohev what it is, what it was.
One of the reasons that I stayed at Ohev is fulfilling a contract. Rabbi Danny did not convert very many people. And I had to sign a contract that I would keep kosher and that I would attend shul unless I was sick every Saturday or out of town. He would agree with that. And that at the end of 2 years, he would review my conversion. And at the time, I went ahead and signed it. I mean, I wanted to convert, I wanted to get married, but, and looking back at it, I thought, and then he left town, so, I didn't have to do that. But I wanted to, because it was a social opportunity as well, because people were so friendly, and they knew us immediately. It was easy to be a member of Ohev because it was like you've been welcomed into a family. That's how I always felt.
I was going to say there's another factor for me at least, and that was the social aspects of the people that I knew. I mean, I knew Mary I've known Mary for 50 years. Shirley Musselman, do you remember? And so, I mean, I knew, and the people that joined with me, like Mike Sholom, Mike Carter, people like that. Mike Carter's my next door neighbor when I first moved to Kansas City. And you know, Mike and I lived in Oak Park and along with a whole bunch of other people out there. So we all kind of joined together and did stuff together. And that kind of social ties made a difference. I mean, once you got in, you were in.
Yeah.
And not only that, but I mean, they dragged me onto the board where I served for 40 years. But, you know, I think overall it was great because these are people that you made lifelong friends with that, you know, those friendships have withstood the test of time.
I think being in the kitchen, I know that I don't like thinking about women in the kitchen, but that is where I really was my base. I started, I can't even remember who dragged me in the kitchen. I think it was Phyllis Denton, and said, you've got to come in here and learn how to do things for the kiddush. So that drew me in, and I love to cook, so that was my home, away from home. I think Elaine and I probably spent more time in the kitchen together than anywhere else.
Yeah.
We were always there.
Always.
It was the camaraderie that we had. So.
But Sally had several years on me before I came into the kitchen. But that I was accepted and allowed to cook in a kosher kitchen without a blink. And I think that's rather unusual.
Yeah, and I was on the board, both the synagogue board and the sisterhood board for the whole time I was there for the 50+ years that we were members. Yeah. I was always on the board, and then I dragged my husband and they made him president. So. And
that is a totally different story. But another reason, when we first joined, we did not have children, but we were about to have our first one, and you know, that's something that we were thinking about. Sally got involved right away. I belonged to the breakfast club after the Sunday morning minyan. We go down and have breakfast and schmooze and talk. And when the kids were born, Ohev had a very strong, very active religious school. A separate building, and like all synagogues, when you move from one place to another, the first building you build is for education. It's the religious school. And the sanctuary came a few years later. Well, all three of our children were born into Ohev and went through Ohev. Our 2 boys and our daughter were all bar and bat mitzvah there, all went through confirmation there, so they were part of the family. Now, one thing I must admit is that during the years the religious school was very strong. We'd be down having breakfast club when they were on their break. So you'd have dozens and dozens of kids running around, but they were not allowed to go into the social hall and join in because that breakfast was for the men. Well, I always managed to sneak a bagel or two out to our two sons. So I'll admit I probably went against the rules there. But how active it was with the kids, and it's not just the adults. In fact, we wound up pulling Sally's parents, Leonard and Esme Pate, into becoming members at Ohev because they belonged to another shul. It's just the closeness, the comfort, and all the facilities and all the religious and educational programs we needed to raise a Jewish family were there, and we took full advantage of it.
Speaking of children, some of my best memories there are after we had our 2 kids. Toby Cooper, Rabbi Danny's wife, they had 4, and she was so great at creating activities. She even did a summer camp. There was always wonderful children's activities going on that our kids could participate in, and she just made it a lot of fun for our children. So we have some good memories.
Yeah, I talked to Mark Slatkin yesterday, who couldn't be here. He's celebrating his birthday today. But he said he remembers when he was in charge of the school board. And that's when we combined with Bethel and KI to have our religious school. And he said there were certainly some challenges there with some staff leaving. And he remembers the education, particularly about the high holidays. And he also remembers his daughter and Lois Clayman's daughter always finding a way on Yom Kippur to find their way to McDonald's. To make sure I shared that memory that he wanted to express today.
I find that, you know, I've been wanting to several other congregations, but it was at Ohev that I was encouraged to really start participating. And I got to end up leading services, and then I started reading Torah, which is something I never thought I'd do. Now it's a regular thing for me. So that was real important to me that I was involved in that way and encouraged to do so.
You know, when they were talking about the breakfast club, I remember when we used to put that together, and Mary was always very particular about how things were done and set up, and it always made it so nice. And
I think that was Cafe Ohev,
well,
we always had
right,
linen and dishes.
absolutely.
Yeah, because Breakfast Club goes back decades, back to my grandfather, and the part really goes back to Clarence Mallon, going way back, Mary may remember him, who always smoked while making the eggs. And on occasion, the eggs had that crunchy little feel of ashes that we ate.
Oh my gosh.
That was Breakfast Club.
Mary was right, the other was Cafe Ohev, which we had.
Oh yeah, that was great. Cafe. Actually, Rabbi Horowitz developed Cafe Ohev because he thought that the Sunday morning minyan, the Breakfast Club, just talked about sports and gossip. And he wanted to have one morning a month where we talked about serious things. And I thought that was a really great idea, and I enjoyed it. I think lots of us did the work and enjoyed it. I didn't like the shopping.
But Rabbi Horowitz was very good with adult education. He had us work on a lot of different projects for that, so that was very good. I learned a lot during that time.
Yeah, it was good. One thing is, I don't know if everybody else felt like this, but I felt like Ohev needed me, like I was an important part of the workforce, or you know, a hard worker, and they needed that. And but then everybody worked.
So Phil, stand up again and turn around. Yeah, because I think it's important to mention that we had bingo was a major fun.
Oh yeah, that's right. Bingo's a big deal.
You know, that's how I got to know Barb and Steve, Alan. I think
that's right. Yeah.
That's how I learned how to make egg salad.
Well, I have a different take on bingo. I was not a member of Ohev at the time, and my mother liked to gamble, and so we went to the bingo, and we sat out kind of in the alcove because at that time they had these big smoke eater things up on the wall in Astor Hall because the cigarette smoke was so thick in there. Because bingo players were smoking. It's a wonder they didn't catch their papers on fire. I mean, there was such thick smoke. So we sat out kind of in the hall. We never won a big bingo. A little bingo here and there. But I didn't know any of these people at that time.
Yeah, the bingo was an event. The chili that was made every week, the chocolate cake that was made every week.
The egg salad.
At that time, the riverboat gambling was just starting to
Exactly.
run, and we were concerned that was our big competitor.
Yeah.
But man, if we didn't have that chili one week, hell to pay.
That was a Phyllis Denton.
Right.
Yeah, I had the chili recipe.
And Frances Lerner is the one who was in charge of it. Every week, she would get together a crew. She was amazing how she could organize this.
Oh, Frances.
Everybody had their jobs, specific jobs.
Sailors as well, they had a week.
Oh, but Frances did it the entire time, up until the boats came and
And at the synagogue, there used to be what's called a bride's room, and we would take
Yeah.
over the bride's
I
room
remember that.
for the bingo. I remember Frances would hold court in the bride's room, and that's where we would get our assignments.
And Francis did the pen tournament too.
Yeah.
Remember? But my mother loved your recipe for chili. I have that recipe. That was one of the reasons she wanted to go play. That's Phyllis's recipe. Right, that's why we wanted to go play bingo at Ohev, because the food was so good. Well, that was true for the life of Ohev. Oh, yeah. Everybody commented on the food. Yeah. And by the way, we're talking about Frances Lerner, and she was King Louis. Her family owned King Louis. Right. That's why we got the T-shirts.
Yeah, because Audrey and Mom sponsored and provided the shirts.
And then we would have a jacket sale.
The jacket sale, right?
We still have a
We had
jacket.
the rummage sale. There's so many things that we
The
did.
flea market. Mary, you got to tell the story.
Oh, the flea market was so much
Garage
fun.
sale.
Sisterhood,
that was great.
Sisterhood did some unbelievable things that really, I mean, all the women, but all the men also participated.
Well, you gotta
Except for
explain,
one
we
thing.
took over the school building, and each
Yeah,
room was a different.
The whole building had different rooms with different items. So we had a whole room of electrical things. And we had somebody who would come in, Marilyn Cohen would come in, and she would work on, or Marilyn Lerner, will work on all of the electrical things so that everything worked, and we could say they worked. So when we sold them, they were workable. And then we had a whole clothes room, and we had all kinds of furniture, and we made big money on that.
Linens.
We made so much money on that, and it was so much fun too.
It was great fun. And Judy's mother, Mary, was always working, always mad at the way we were doing.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
raising the prices or lowering the prices.
I have a really great flea market story, and this may have been the first one or second one, but Alan and Mike and Naomi Silverman were getting new bedroom furniture, and so they gave us their old bedroom furniture, and it was set up. We had an area really set up for a bedroom, and at the time we had one of those cloth sculptures that they're life-size sculpture of a woman. She had a wig on and jewelry and everything, and so somebody donated it to us, and we set her on the bed. So Alan, who is in the rag business, brought his racks and hangers for us to use, and so he was setting that up, and we called this gal on the bed Booby. Alan saw her and went over and threw her on the bed and had his way with her.
And her head flew off.
And Janice was in the corner yelling, Alan, Alan, Alan.
And her head flew off.
Oh my gosh. And then he got up and sat on that bed. Remember, and smoked his cigar.
No.
You might want to do it.
Well, after working many hours, we needed some relief.
Well, you know, Judy's mother was mentioned, and that reminds me of Hamantaschen, how if the Hamantaschen weren't ready to be packed in the boxes, she'd come by and wrap you on the hand with a wooden spoon. And we need to talk about Hamantaschen, and I think you'd be a good person to get into that, dear.
Major.
Well,
Yeah, before we do that, I do want to say, we talked about the fun of the rummage sales. I'll give you 3 names who didn't think it was so much fun. Arnie Birnbaum, Cal Cohn, and Keith Stovers, who rented trucks.
They rented trucks to.
And they worked their hearts out carrying heavy furniture.
Yes.
Sandy Hips and
Well, then Sandy Hips, yeah.
and Marvin Denton.
Yeah.
You know that this moving company called Two Men in a Truck, they named themselves 2 AKs in a van.
They worked their hearts out.
Oh, they did, yeah.
Okay, so Kumantasha, that's,
You know what's amazing about OHEV, this is the best part, that I could count, if I went to a Saturday service, that the people, the congregation would prepare a kiddush luncheon. They would shop for it. There was no catering involved ever. It was all of our own people that made a great meal every weekend. And they did that for years and years and years.
And delicious.
And then they cleaned it all up after that. And
I
was just, yeah, right.
I'd like to know where everybody put their plates.
Yeah. You know, it was just such an amazing feat for these people to every week start worrying. Services were on Saturday. By Saturday afternoon, they were already planning the next kiddush luncheon for the next week. And who was going to shop it, who was going to cook it, who was going to lay it out, how they were going to do it. I mean, it was like a finely tuned machine.
Well, to go on in that manner, I'd like to talk about Scholar in Residence, which at OHEV was a wonderful, wonderful thing. And the people would do a Friday night meal.
Oh, yeah.
We do the Saturday Kiddush. And we would do the third meal on Saturday night. And then Cafe in the morning. And this was all volunteers. Never catered. It was, Ruth Roth was a wonderful caterer, but she would come in and help. We would not, she would just help out. She was just a helper. And we would prepare all of those meals. And they were delicious. Well, Elaine's hamburger steak was the best ever, and I've tried to duplicate it, and I can't. Well, Mary, I'll have to have you over for this.
Did she give you the whole recipe?
She gave me the recipe.
She left out one ingredient, so it can be the same.
One thing we haven't talked about that was so close to my heart was Shabbaton.
Oh, sisterhood.
Sisterhood.
That was
Shabbaton.
fabulous.
We went to the Temple of B'nai Yehuda Retreat Center, which was near
Cleveland, Missouri.
47th and
Holmes. In Cleveland, Missouri.
Cleveland, Missouri. And we went out there once a year, and it was the women. And I think the most we ever had was probably close to 50. And then by the time it was really done, we probably ended up with 35 or so. But we had every generation. In fact, Bev, I think your mother came out.
Oh, sure. Spent the night.
Yeah, she spent the night. We had all kinds of ages, clear down to newborn babies. And we would stay out there. We would do all of our own cooking. Mary and I would go and shop for all the food, and we would cook the Friday night dinner. It was always wonderful dinner. And then we'd have food all weekend. And of course, we always had to have a little bit of libation. Or a lot of libation.
We weren't driving.
Yeah, but it was wonderful. We were out there during tornadoes, floods, you name it, we were there.
It was fun. I remember when I went. Booze, mahjong, and snakes.
Oh, yeah.
We played taboo till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I learned how to play Maj there from Lisa Siegel's grandmother. I can't remember what was her name. And she was from Poland, and she had managed to get over here before the Holocaust with her family. And she would talk about that. I can't remember her name. I can't remember it. Anyway, she was a friend of my mother-in-law. Anyway, she and Shelley were sitting there, and they said, "You can come play." And I said, "I don't know how to play Maj." And she says, "Well, you have to learn." And so I said, this woman was very firm, "You have to learn." And so I sat down and learned how to play Maj. And that's what I got out of Shabbaton, not anything Jewish. Well, of course, Mahjong is. but.
Well, this country
And I have another thought about that Shabbaton, which is a little bit different. That part of the out there in that part of the country, my great-grandfather, Adam Brunker, had a farm not more than 10 minutes from there.
Oh, really?
And so I can remember going down there.
Two things about the retreat. One, Joy Quinn was very knowledgeable about Jewish religion and
yes.
reading from the Torah and the service. And when I went to Hebrew school, I learned how to write in cursive, and I learned how to conjugate verbs, but I never understood the Saturday service. And she taught me everything about the parts of the service so I would understand their Shachri and the Kut de Zimrat. She taught me how to, she stood there and worked with me so I could learn how to take an aliyah. And so there was a lot of learning that also went on at the retreats. It was enjoyable, but what I know about the synagogue service, I learned from Dory Quinn. And the traditions at eating, I never knew you had to have 2 challahs and you throw salt over your shoulder. From her kids knew all about Jewish traditions. I learned a lot, and I think the most important thing is that this was the brainchild of Mary. And she decided that instead of just having a regular sisterhood installation, we were going to go far out into the country, and we weren't going to charge anybody because we wanted everyone to go to the very first one. And she created this weekend retreat idea from nowhere.
Thank you, but also Donna Oberstein.
And it helped you, but it was your initial idea.
It's called Miriam's Well. It's really well.
Well, thank you. But one of the best stories about the retreat was Dorothy Catcher, who is Randy's mom, had worried about all of these women out there in the country with no security whatsoever. And so Phyllis Denton said that she would bring her 22 rifles, which that satisfied Dorothy. And we have a picture of her out there holding, in fact Randy has it, holding the rifle. Or it may have been a 22, a BB gun, I don't know.
I think it was a real rifle.
It was a rifle.
Well, let me tell you, with the women in that group, any burglar would be out of his mind. And Pearl Miller, who could beat anybody at ping pong. And she was very competitive.
Wow. She and Phyllis would play for hours.
I got in trouble once. My
Just
family. I became president a lot. We were there during the Purim celebration, and our daughter Shira was, I guess, in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, and she was dressed up, and the kids would come up, and Rabbi Danny would ask who they were dressed in, and then ask a very simple question for them to answer. So I'm sitting in the back of the shul with Sally. You know, that sanctuary is rather big, and we didn't think the acoustics were all that good. We didn't think they were. So Rabbi Danny asked our daughter, Shira, who are you dressed at? And she said, Queen Esther. He said, that's fine. Now here's my question for you. Shira, who led the Israelites across the Red Sea? And I just turned to Sally in a very low voice and said, Charlton Heston. And Rabbi Danny looks up and yells out, no, Gordon, it was Moses. Sally goes under the chair, and our daughter saved the day by saying, it was Moses. And so, yeah, and I never heard the last of that one. One thing I do want to bring up about everybody talking about, definitely everybody coordinating things together. And when I was asked to and agreed to be president for my first tour, president of Ohev, without ever having come up with chain. And, you know, I knew I would need a lot of help and assistance. And I did get it from anybody and everybody. And I think the synagogue survived at least my first 2 years as president. But one thing I did is I asked Joel, we went out, I think, to have some coffee at that restaurant right near us on 95th and Antioch, Johnny's Tavern. And I said, you know, I said, Joel, have you ever seen the TV show Blue Bloods? He said, no, I don't think I have. I said, well, it's Tom Selleck is the police commissioner in New York. And he had a chief of staff. And they argue all the time. And his chief of staff was a true chief of staff. He did not tell Tom Selleck what he wanted to hear. He told him what he needed to hear. And I said, Joel, that's what I need help from you. Guide me and anybody else who can. And Joel, having been involved in all areas of the synagogue for generations, I think it came down through the DNA. It wasn't. I said, anytime I need any assistance, you think, guide me. And boy, he did. And every time there was a phone call, I said, here we go again. But whenever he sent out an email with advice or recommendations, always as recommendations, and he's done that to many people here, he would always end it with this phrase, those are just my 2 cents worth. If he had given me 2 cents every time he said that, I could have funded my 3 kids' college education. But that's just the way he is, and that was to help. Anytime anybody needed any kind of assistance, whether it was doing a program or running the operation of the synagogue, he was there, and he's not the only one. Everybody else would help everybody else out. And that was an aspect of Ohev that all of us really remember.
And Larry, do you recall the most important piece of advice I gave you?
Yes, and I will tell you what it is in the 5 words. Stay out of the kitchen. And boy, oh yes, that was one of the first pieces of advice he gave me, and I did. I never
but that doesn't mean at home too.
No. I have a little sisterhood story about advice. A member of sisterhood, when I was very new to Ohev, I asked for a honey cake recipe. Now, how hard could that be? Well, I don't know if I should say her name or not. This sisterhood member who was a terrible cook.
Just give us initials.
RN. Anyway,
I don't know who that is.
I'll tell you later. Anyway, she gave me her recipe. Horrendous cook. I've eaten at her house. It's one of those eat before you go kind of things. And before I got home, I had 4 women stop me and say, I'll send you my recipe. I'll send you my recipe. Don't use that recipe. Don't use that recipe. Oh my goodness. And I still have Sally's recipe, which is, in my opinion, the best. I have Louise Siegel's recipe, which not so good. But anyway, the women at Ohev were so insistent that I would have a good Rosh Hashanah with a decent honey cake. And it was really, it's just so wonderful. They were great women.
So we kind of touched on Hamantash, but let's talk about Hamantash. That was a big deal.
Yeah. Well, the Hamantash and Queen is not in our group right now.
Carol often.
But it was really Phyllis. And Alan. But Phyllis and somebody else developed all of those recipes we used.
Well, Mary knows more about
Mary, you know more about that.
Actually, in my memory, it was Carol Offenbach. Phyllis certainly was the cook of that egg.
Yes.
And she's the one that figured out how to make a prune filling.
Right, and the
apricot. But Carol Offenbach organized that.
She could calculate to the last cup of flour.
Absolutely.
How many cups of flour were used?
And I told her once that she should give up the synagogue work and go to work for a factory to organize them. And I was serious, but I think she took it as an insult. She knew how many ounces and how much a pound cost of sugar and how that broke down to ounces.
Micro minutia, she was into
Well, Steph once said that he would give Sisterhood $10,000 a year if she would stop doing it. It was driving him nuts.
It was good hamantash.
But the hamantash we made, and I ended up being in charge of it for, I don't know why, because I said I would. And anyway, Carol Offenbach was so particular about how everything would be done. Marvin Denton would sell thousands, literally thousands of these little cookies, which I know you're not supposed to say cookie. You have to say hamantash, and cookie is a shorter word. I explained that to her, but no, don't go on. And she would know exactly how much we would need and how many orders there were going to be. And she was just fabulous with that. But she drove her husband nuts because from about November through April every year was hamantaschen season.
Right.
And she would, she was just phenomenal about it, but she knew who would do what. And when I took over for her, she says, okay, now, when you do the dough, Steve and Keith Silverman will break the eggs. Keith Silvers will break the eggs. Shirley Ernstein will lay the flour. Bev Levine will do, she knows how to stack it on the shelf so that it'll be in the right order. And then you can help with the mixer if you want to, but she would be there for that. And she had all of these.
Judy Hockman's mother.
Mary would
be a big helper, a big
yes.
partner.
And then you had to have the people to juice and run the juicer. David could run the juicer. She had all of these assignments and she had them written down. And she says, now I don't mind you taking over, but don't change anything.
Hamantaschen was a sisterhood fundraiser.
Right.
And one year for sisterhood, I was the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And so hamantaschen fell under my purview. Well, I wasn't worried about it, but Carol was. And she really took over, and I was glad she did because I was lost when I got into it, but there was no danger of not doing it properly with Carol.
You could always tell it was hamantaschen season because you could literally see flower footprints going from Asner Hall to the outside of this building. Literally.
And Alan's handprints on all the
Alan was
tradition, right.
Alan was the best president.
That's the proof that you were there.
Well, the proof is you got home and you got flour on you.
You know, I know Steve and I, along with Mike Silverman and a few others, we were packers.
Yeah.
And it was mentioned before, but we literally did get our hands slapped by Mary, you know, Judy's mother.
To sneak around.
Because,
Judy's mom.
oh yeah, if she didn't deem them ready to be packed, and we should accidentally on purpose grab one to be packed, she'd go, I mean, it was, oh yeah.
And there were no samples. Every hamantaschen was to be sold. No samples whatsoever.
Well, the burned and misshapen poor things.
Well, yeah, but making them misshapen was...
And even those, you could serve those at a kiddush.
That's true.
So this wouldn't sell them.
You don't sell them, but you could serve them at a kiddush.
And it was surely a social event too, because when all the people came in to process them and bake them, I mean, there was a party. It was like a party. It was fun. Another thing that I remember is learning how to make challahs, and one of our deceased members who I was very close with, Vicki Pullman, taught me how to make challah, and she taught me how to braid 4-strand, 3-strand, 5-strand. Vicki Pullman.
Oh yeah, she made the best challah.
She was the challah queen. And that's something that she was also very active with me on the Chabaton also, and she loved to do charades, and I still have all of her cards of charades. If anybody ever likes to do charades, we can do it.
Right,
The other person who was very instrumental in teaching me something was Shirley Penner. She taught us how to make babka. One Sunday we all went in and she taught us how to make babka. So it was a very educational.
You know, and I have my little square out, and I was sprinkling it with the cinnamon sugar, and she walked by and she says, I guess you don't want a lot of filling. And you know, you need to have it over here. She was very direct.
Yeah.
Very direct.
Well, yeah, she still is.
But she made wonderful babka.
Wonderful everything.
Yeah.
Vicky
Google,
Pullman
too.
also catered bar and bat mitzvahs. She got together
She and I,
women
SOS.
and huge bar and bat mitzvahs. She would get them together and would make tuna, egg salad, all these desserts.
The
Oh,
desserts.
sweet
Oh.
Yeah. That she could organize that, and there were a lot of bar and bat mitzvahs. One year when the Wasserman's daughter Shira, and my son, there were 8 kids in that graduating class, and she went and catered, arranged.
I still have her shopping list for a regular Shabbat and how many cans of tuna you need for a Shabbat. The big ones from Marvin. But I don't think we should conclude without talking about Shirley Levine, who was Joel's mom. But when I first joined Ohev, I was asked to be in this play. It was the year Sisterhood turned 10. And Ansley Swade and Barbara Goldansky and Ruth Diamond wrote this takeoff of a Broadway play. I can't remember what one at this point. And so they made up the words to the tunes, the Broadway tunes. And Shirley could adapt that, you know, those words to fit the original words perfectly. And I know Shirley's mother played for silent movies in Kansas City, Kansas. But that's when I first met Joel, was my first play, because I think he was 17. And he was playing in the kids' orchestra that his mother developed and managed, right?
Yeah, we were the only synagogue who had our own little orchestra where, you know, at least 2 members of that orchestra went on to play professionally. That's how they made a living. Stan Kessler, myself. You know, and then other things we did ourselves didn't get a lot of attention, but were necessary. I know, Phil, you spent a lot of time pulling together the history of Ohev. Randy, I know you spent a lot of time on roofs, fixing the buildings. I mean, those were the kinds of things that...
Keith and you did so much.
And Sheldon Jarevsky.
Yeah. And tearing up the sidewalk and pouring new concrete.
And building a new trash.
Yes, absolutely.
There was an old member, Blaine Asner. Now, the Asner family apparently was very important at Ohev. I came before, they were all pretty much gone except for Labe when we became members, but Labe Asner had a scrap metal company. And Sheldon and Keith asked Labe if he could donate some rebar or something to make that trash place in the back. And he was so thrilled to have done it. And he came and watched, even though at that point he was very, you know, old and not doing all that well. But, you know, that was something that was very important.
But Mark also had a nickname during the high holidays of the Grim Reaper because we had the presidents always sitting on the bima, and if you would see Mark coming up to the bima, you knew it was bad news, and that's the last thing you ever wanted to see at the high holidays was Mark approaching the
But he
president.
always had a radio in his ear. He
Yeah,
always had
you didn't want to, you did not want to see Mark coming up to the bell.
something now.
That was our security, part of our limited security plan with the walkie-talkies that we talked to the guards with and so forth. And actually, during the regular year, Steve remembers this, he and I used to sit at the back of the sanctuary. We were the first guard to get somebody coming in to cause some problems. Steve sat on the left-hand side as you look toward the BEMA, and I sat on the right-hand side. We sat in the back rows for that reason. Of course, Steve was gobbling a lot of the time, too. But
I just remember, Mark, one time when you were approached by one of the babysitters and said, we need a diaper change, and we don't have a diaper. In the babysitting room, there were people, and they'd come to you for
right.
to find
We had all
parents.
sorts of strange goings on in the background that people never heard about. I mean, we just kind of kept it beneath the surface so that it wouldn't disrupt anything.
Well, I just remember the 3 T's of high holidays that Joel would say. Time, temperature, and toilet paper.
You got all those 3 right. We had a successful high
The
holiday.
temperature was not easy to control in that building.
Well, I think Meredith had to go out, or Steve Berman had to go out and buy toilet paper one year.
The porta potty bat mitzvah.
Oh!
My first few months, as my first term as president, we had rented the education building long-term to Al-Ayerson, and we had to have, in order part of the renovation of the building, which hadn't been used in many years, unfortunately, was water and pipelines in there. A lot had to be done to renovate it and get it ready, and to meet the OSHA and requirements to have a daycare and a preschool there. Well, it just so happened that there was a bat mitzvah. In fact, the only bar bat mitzvah for the last 4 or 5 years, 6 years. And it just so happened that particular weekend that all the restrooms in both buildings were inoperable, not able to be used. So we called up very quickly to get porta potties out there in the parking lot, close by the west entrance, so people could use the facilities. Well, they dropped them off 2 days before. Sally and I went over to take a look, and where they put them was at the far end, at the end of the sidewalk, right next to 75th Street. About the furthest distance you could have from the entrance. So we went in there, knowing Sally, the fastidious housekeeper she is, we went in there the day before the high holiday started, and we brought our Clorox and Kleenex, and we just cleaned those things to a much greater degree than the company did, and even put signs out there for men and women, and crossed our fingers. Well, after the bar mitzvah, I got up, I actually gave an apology to the family because they were really incensed about all this. And I just hoped that the weather was nice and people didn't have to go out in the rain. Well, as it happened, everything was fine. The weather was great. It was sunny. And most people had very good bladders, and their big concern was not going out of the bathroom, it was going downstairs to eat all the food for the kiddish, okay? But that was about, again, Ohev came through, and you never know what's going to happen, and that was about the worst thing. While we were cleaning the day before, a couple of trucks drove into the parking lot, and looked like cowboys got out and said, "Can I use these bathrooms?" I said, "We don't know. They're I think from one of them we said there's a gas station. And we let one of the people, one of the drivers use it because he needed to. He was very, very clean. We just cleaned up after him. But the one thing I remember about that pop is, so we got through it. We survived. There was no issue. And nobody got cramps. Everybody got used the johns as they needed. As I say, whether you're a member, president, or anything with a synagogue, you never know, something's going to come up. Something always has to be resolved.
Well, Mark, wasn't there somebody that got locked in one of the
Yes, I was
bathrooms?
just thinking of that. I can't remember who it was.
Harry Ruskin.
Was it Harry? Okay, yeah. Yeah, it happened during high holidays. The locking mechanism of the men's room was messed up. And as luck would have it, it came down and locked them in the room there. We had to call, I can't remember, somebody had tools. It wasn't Randy, but it was somebody on the house committee, I think,
locked into a stall.
was able to get him out of there, but he was in there for quite a while.
I can hear Adonai right now. Oi, my people.
That particular bat mitzvah, I was in the kitchen preparing along with, I can't remember who else was in there, but there were several of us. We were sloshing.
Yes!
In water.
Yes!
We just tried not to think what was in the water.
Well, earlier in the week,
and kept working.
earlier in the week it was backed up. And
Oh,
you know,
yeah, yeah.
we're just women. We don't know anything. We're just women, and we reported that it's all right. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Like, yeah, right. Oh, but I remember sloshing through that water. Oh my gosh.
Is anything swimming in it?
Well, I went home and scrubbed my feet.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness.
And then we had all the fundraisers and sold a lot of tickets to things that, especially Marvin Denton and Lay Baskin.
Oh, yeah.
Would be the salespeople that would make our fundraisers. You know, everybody else worked hard too, but I remember taking tickets over to Lay. And I would say, we've got another fundraising coming up, Lay. I got tickets for you. This is a recording. I will not repeat what Lay told me. But of course, he always ended up by saying, I don't want to see you, don't come over. At which point I said, I'll be there in 5 minutes. We're very close to here, my other house too. And I took him the tickets, and then he always explained to me, he said, you know, if I'm selling $2,000 worth of tickets, you know what that means? I said, of course it does. You've got to buy $2,000 worth of stuff from somebody else. And he always came through, and then Marvin sold hundreds.
And Hamantash.
Yeah, don't forget Bob Magoon. He sold
Bob Magoon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, especially at Kosher Fest. He sold a lot of bags and they salad.
Oh, yeah. I would like to mention Keith Silver too, who was always in on this schlepping. I mean, he did lots of things, but always worked with the guys on schlepping furniture and
recycling for sisterhood.
And we developed a recycling program, and he offered, or maybe we asked him and he agreed to take all of that crap to recycling centers. And he did that until we moved.
Yeah, he did. The Morning Minions, maybe just a couple other topics. That somehow we did it. We you know.
Page 9. If you are a Morning Minion person, you would.
One thing I would, and this has all been so enjoyable with the memories, but there's one thing that Ohev members have always been a part of, and actually did help our Jewish War Veterans Post 605, which has many members in it. In fact, King Louis did provide the jackets we have now with our logo on them. But tomorrow, May 29th, 2023, is Memorial Day, which we all know started as Decoration Day to honor the deceased of, this was during the Civil War, both sides, and officially became a federal holiday only about 50 years ago, to honor those who died in serving our country. And in the education wing on the wall there, which many people passed by, and after a while maybe didn't realize there was a big, huge, and very heavy bronze medal plaque of members of the Beth Horon Lodge. Many of it were associated with Ohev, who served our country in World War II, and it had even some who died in action. That particular plaque is now we somehow got it over to the Jewish Community Center and had help getting it out, and it is now on display at the Jewish War Veterans Museum. But it is Beth Horan Lodge members, but really it's Ohev members who served. And you know, I just wanted to bring that up in honor of these people who served and those who lost their lives. Jewish members of Ohev Sholom who served our country in any kind of conflict, and their memories are still emblazoned and marked on that plaque, which was at Ohev Sholom and is now at the Jewish Community Center.
Yeah, and in fact, in the memorabilia room, we're going to display one of the Yorkside boards from Ohev. They'll see the board that my grandparents donated after their son, the uncle I didn't know, was killed in World War II. So.
One of the things I do want to talk about, though, that we haven't really talked about is what makes a synagogue also not only the people, but the rabbis through the years. And Steve would always talk about Rabbi Miller, because I did not know him or interact, but he was your bar mitzvah rabbi. But through the years, we had a progression of different rabbis, and how did everybody deal with them or not deal with them. And I would just like, I have very fond memories of Danny Horowitz, because he was so good to my in-laws. He was very kind in several instances. He stepped in and he knew the right thing to say and the right thing to do. Yes, very intuitive of him.
He made me ask 3 times before he would take me to the mikveh.
Well, that's everybody.
No, not everybody does that, but I mean, that's one of the things.
I was just wondering if anybody else had any stories about
Well,
rabbis.
I actually thought it would be very important for us to, if we haven't enough of a situation, to go through the lineage of the rabbis.
I would like to do that, yeah.
And, you know, I also remember Rabbi Miller, as certainly does Joel, and his wife Leah, who taught me in kindergarten, Sunday school. She was a very lovely lady. And their daughter, Felice, was married to David Pillay, who became the second rabbi that I'm my rabbi for my bar mitzvah.
He didn't last very long, did he?
10 years, I think.
Yeah. Oh, did he? Was he there 10 years? Rabbi Pillay was there when I joined. And my assessment of him is he's very shy. He was also a CPA, and Ohev put pressure on him to come and be our rabbi because he was working as a CPA, which was his plan all along. You know, he was in an Orthodox communities where everybody gets a smekah, but I mean a degree to be a rabbi. But anyway, he came. I thought he was very, very shy. And one time he had adult education classes, and we were in different people's homes. And the subject was abortion. And I thought, oh, how is David Pillay going to deal with this? And he was fat.
How do we wrap this up? What?
So yeah, I mean, like I would say, I mean, think about anything. Is there any other stories that nobody knows about that you'd like to share and have on permanent record?
Permanent record.
Well, I have a story, and it's historical. And when I joined the synagogue, I was showing Rabbi White newspaper articles of early Ohev, 1870s, 1880s. Nobody knew anything about. That's my hobby, is newspaper research. And so he asked me to put something together which the synagogue published, a history of the synagogue in the earliest years, from 1877 to 1923. 1923 is when 2 small synagogues in Kansas City, Kansas merged and took on the new name of Ohev. So probably the most surprising story I ever found was that at one time, Ohev owned a cemetery. Ohev owned a cemetery. And it was not Ohev, it was Gomel Chesed. And what I found out was that what is today Mount Carmel was at one time 2 Jewish cemeteries next to each other. Yes. Gomel Chesed had 2 acres, and this Orthodox Burial Society, Bikur Cholim, had 10 acres. They were right next to each other. And then, okay, so Gomel Chesed bought their 2 acres in 1890. And within Mount Carmel is a little Gomel Chesed section that I found. There is a little section, yes. And then, but what happened was that when Sheffield Cemetery started in 1901, everybody started going there. It was too far to go out there. So that little section really, there was no more after about 1900 because Sheffield started. And so it was pretty much abandoned. There's only about 12 in the little section. But Gomel Chesed owned it and then sold it to Beth Sholom in about 35. I'm probably off 1 or 2 years. Sold it to what was then, Beth Sholom was called Knesset Israel Beth Sholom, and sold it. But Ohev had 2 acres out there at one time.
Wow.
That's something.
And this discovery that I made, and I have it in my book that Ohev published, was an accident on my part, how I even found out about it. It was accidental, because what happened was that I was at the Mid-Continent Library in Independence, Genealogical Library.
Oh, I've been out there.
And I was looking at deed records. And I found this deed record for Gomel Chesed buying something in 1890. But I didn't know what the legalese was. And so I just assumed, well, that must be down in the West Bottoms. Maybe that's when they bought some land for a synagogue. But then, when I did some research, I found out it was part of what is today Mount Carmel. And the reason it was an accident, and I didn't know this, was that in the early days of Jackson County, there were 2 separate records. You had the courthouse in Independence and the courthouse in Jackson County, and they have 2 separate records. And what I found was the records from Independence, which is separate from the Kansas City, Missouri records. So I found this out by accident.
I know you did a lot of research.
Wow. I'd love to know who's buried there.
Well,
The names.
Well, it's in the years from about 1890 to 1900. There's about 12 of them. And so what's interesting is that if you go out there, there is this oldest section, and then there's another oldest section. Usually you have the real old sections, 1880s, 1890s, they're all together, but they're not. There is a Gomel Chesed section, which is maybe a couple hundred feet away, and there's like 10 of them there.
And one away from the West Bottoms.
Yeah, so we were brought together with the merger.
Yeah, so right before Rabbi Miller was hired, is when it was now Ohev Sholom actually sold that to Knesset Israel Beth Sholom. Sold it to Beth Sholom. 2 acres.
Well, that's funny.
Wow,
That's something.
That's interesting.
And it's my understanding that the name Ohev Sholom was chosen because the 2 little synagogues that decided to combine were always arguing.
Yes.
And so the new combined synagogue called Ohev Sholom, lovers of peace.
Lovers of peace.
That's what we are, lovers of peace.
But I think that that's true. I think that Ohev Sholom always takes care of their own people.
Well, they got the love part down. It was not always peaceful.
Yeah, a lot of what we got there. Any other final thoughts or ideas or memories?
It's a wrap.
I have a memory of your father. We had a minor leak in the roof. It was an occasional leak. How hard was it raining? Which way was the wind blowing? And I remember when it rained on your dad, and he said, "We're getting that fixed." Do you remember that?
I do not.
Joel's dad was always part of my Friday morning minion breakfast too. And so was your mom.
Yeah. Good memories.
Yeah,
That's good.